Hey everyone, and welcome to another action-packed episode of the Agency Accelerator. Today we are talking all things white labeling. Now I know we've spoken about this before, but I think it's a really important topic. For many people who are just starting out in their agency life, they might be freelancing. White labeling for another agency is a great way of getting your clients. And then as you grow, you may also decide that providing white labeling to an agency is a way of getting consistent business as well as finding your own end clients. So we're going to talk about how to make sure that you find the right partners and you have this equal partner-partner relationship. We're going to talk about getting the pricing right and how to cope with scope creep. And then we're going to flip it on its head and talk about if you're an agency and you want to bring in some additional services through a white label partner, how do you go about finding them and how do you make sure you have a great partnership relationship? So another action-packed episode, and let's get on with the show.
Accelerate your agency's profitable growth with tools, tips, and value-added interviews with your host, agency owner and coach, Rob DaCosta.
Today's episode of the Agency Accelerator Podcast is sponsored by Cloudways. Loved by agencies around the world, Cloudways is a managed cloud hosting platform that takes care of all the web hosting related complexities, leaving users free to focus on growing their businesses and clients. The platform offers unmatched performance, reliability, choice, and 24/7 365 support that acts as an extension to your own team, making Cloudways the ultimate choice for growing agencies. Now, at present, Cloudways is offering an exclusive discount for the Agency Accelerator listeners. So visit cloudways.com and use the promo code AA20. That's AA20 to get a discount of 20% off your first 3 months on the hosting platform of your choice. Okay, on with today's show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Agency Accelerator podcast. I'm really excited to talk about this topic today because it's one that we haven't spoken about before, and that is white labeling your services as an agency or indeed buying in services from another agency as white labeling. And I'm joined by an expert on this topic, John Horn. And John is the managing partner of StubGroup. And StubGroup are a premier Google partner ranked in the top 1% of all Google partners worldwide. And John has also taught marketing to over 85,000 students online, which is pretty impressive. And John's been with the StubGroup for close to a decade, working with companies across the globe, managing marketing for them, mainly focusing on pay-per-click. So as I said, John, that's a pretty impressive track record. So do you want to just start off by telling us a bit about your journey in the agency world?
Absolutely. And Rob, thanks so much for having me on here. I've been looking forward to the conversation and digging into white labeling in particular. It's one of the things I'm excited about in the work that we do here at StubGroup. So just kind of give background on what we do. We are a pay-per-click advertising agency. And the way I got into things was back at the very beginning. We started out, there were two co-founders to the agency, and they've been in marketing for a long time. And we're looking at the trends of where is marketing going, what types of services are businesses going to be needing in the next 5, 10, 15 years and so forth. And at that point, pay-per-click, which is still currently, and also at that point was primarily Google advertising, Microsoft advertising, Facebook, etc. It was very prevalent, but also in some ways nascent in that many businesses had not yet made the switch to a more digital advertising component to their marketing strategies. They still were kind of stuck in the traditional world, but they were heading that direction because they were realizing that the customers they needed to reach were online, and so they would need to be online to reach them. And so we started StubGroup at that point, wanting to both capture the existing business that existed in the marketplace, as well as grow along with the growth of pay-per-click and search engines and Facebook and all that's happened in the last close to a decade here. So that's how we kind of started things out, and I came on board as the first employee with the co-founders, and really we just bootstrapped it, figured out how to do things, figured out how to be successful for our clients, how to get those clients on board, and then grow our team along with our client base, and eventually reach things like that Premier Google Partner status you mentioned, Facebook Marketing Partner status, so forth, to be able to have those relationships and credibility with the platforms we're using for our clients to help our clients best succeed.
Yeah, fantastic. So you must have seen so much change in the pay-per-click world. It's changing by the month, really, isn't it? With Apple keeping changing their, and the latest operating system, I think, makes it even harder for tracking and so on and so on. So I guess there's a big effort to stay up to date with what's going on in that world.
It is very much an adventure. And, it's kind of the curse and blessing of our field in that, yeah, there's always something new to learn, and what you did yesterday may not work today. But at the same time, that's why we have work to do. And that's why we're being paid, is to keep on top of those things and to be able to leverage those insights for our clients who they just want to run their businesses. They don't want to spend their days reading Google announcements and testing Facebook campaigns and so forth.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to talk about white labeling, and let's just start with a couple of fundamental questions. You and I obviously know what we mean by that, but just give us a quick definition of what we mean by white labeling, and also why would an agency consider white labeling their services?
Yeah, absolutely. So white labeling typically means when you have a service provider, let's say, as an example, an SEO agency. They do SEO for clients, and they want to provide a service to those clients, but they don't have the in-house capacity to do that service. So in that scenario, they might go to another service provider, such as StubGroup, who does specialize in that service, and say, hey, we want you to do this work, execute this work on behalf of our client. But we don't want to just send the client over to you. We want to retain that client relationship. We want to maintain a cohesive point of contact for our client. And also, we want to profit from providing this service to our client. And so the agency, in this example, say the SEO agency, they will sell PPC as a service to their client. And they'll take that money, and then they will come and hire StubGroup to provide that service. And obviously there'll be margin there that they'll profit from for the work that they're putting into coordinating things, for finding that solution, and just providing that solution to the end client.
Yeah, and I always tell my clients, there's two key times to outsource services, whether that be freelancer or white labeling. And one of those times is when you have capacity issues. And one of those times is when you have a service you need to provide that you don't have the skills in-house to provide, or you don't want to have the skills. So in your example, there may be an SEO agency that really wants to focus on SEO, but they've got a few clients that are asking them to do some PPC work. And so they think, okay, we'll bring in a partner to do it. So
I was just going to say one thing that we see there often in terms of that thought process on the agency side is, do I really want to go through all that work of hiring a new employee, of vetting them, of trying to figure out if they know what they're talking about when I don't know what they're talking about as, say, an SEO expert? How do I vet somebody on the PPC side really, and then invest that risk into bringing an employee on or multiple employees and hoping I'm going to get the business that will be able to meet payroll every month, as opposed to, hey, project based, go find a partner, client comes in, pays you, cool, we've got money to pay them, and you're just passing that risk on.
Yeah, and also if it doesn't fit in your core wheelhouse of what you do as an agency, then there's quite a big risk to start hiring staff immediately without the certainty that you're going to have a consistent amount of projects or retained work coming in to pay for it. So talking about paying, let's just talk a little bit about, there's lots of sort of minefields and tips and tricks and things that we need to explore with the whole white labeling thing. But one of them is pricing. How do you, if you're white labeling your services through another agency, how do you get the price right? And how do you make sure that the agency isn't bashing you down on price, because obviously they want to add their margin on top of that? And I know I'm sort of sharing some of these. A lot of the questions today are questions that have come from my clients who have white labeled in some form or another. So I'm kind of just passing them on to you to get your view on it.
Absolutely. So the way that we've approached that historically is definitely looking at each situation, each partner who's reaching out and saying, hey, we want a white label, and customizing pricing in a way that's a win-win for each side. Because like you said, you don't want to get bashed down by your partner. You don't want to just say, hey, let's make pennies on the dollar. It's not going to be a good long-term scenario. And also at the same time, you want to create a scenario where the partner who is hiring you to do white label services is incentivized to do that and incentivized to go out and bring on new clients because they're also making a great margin. So it's usually a process of some negotiation, some talking with that partner to figure out, okay, what's realistic here in terms of what they're looking to charge their clients. And at our end, we're looking at scope of work. So with white labeling, one of the big reasons why we can offer a discount often to our partners is because in theory, we have less communication that's going to end up happening, because instead of us having 50 different clients that we have to have separate communication with and separate relationships with, we're going to have centralized communication with our agency partner, who their own team has those relationships, and we're able to have significant time savings, significant labor savings by not having all of those disparate relationships going on. And therefore we can pass that on in the forms of cost savings to our partner. But you've got to figure out that scope of work and expectations going into things and be very clear about that, because scope creep also is something that happens constantly, where you agree to X and say, yep, I can give you this discount because we're not going to be doing whatever. Let's say installing conversion tracking. Your partner says, hey, we're going to take care of making sure codes get installed. Cool. Well, I can give a discount to a partner because I know how much time it takes for my team to generate those codes, install those codes, troubleshoot those codes. If we're not doing that, well, then that's not time we have to spend, give you a discount, etc. But then, 2 clients down the road, that partner comes to you and says, hey, we're not really sure what we're doing here. Can you just hop in and install these codes? That's where things get tricky. And so you have to have a process in place to identify that type of scope creep occurring, and kindly but firmly also pushing back and having clear communication with your partner to say, hey, we gave you X pricing because we're giving you X services. If you want Y services, cool, we can do that, but then pricing is going to have to change as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a good moral for any agency that's listening to this around their pricing, whether they're white labeling or not. It's just a good strategy to get your boundaries in place, get really clear on your scope of work. I've written before, John, about you actually used the exact words, the can you just request from a client or from an agency or a white label, that they are implying that this is a really trivial thing for you to do, but often it isn't. And there's that dreaded, can you just do this? Can you just do that? So, get your scope of work. Now, when it comes to, you've defined your scope of work and you've agreed that, I don't need to get too much into the mechanics of how you do it, but what's your views on how you price that? Do you price that against that scope of work? Do you take a time and materials kind of approach, an hourly rate, daily rate, or even a value-based pricing rate? What was your advice around that?
Yeah, great question. So typically we'll look at labor costs because that's really the primary cost to us. Is we are selling the time of the team that we have, as well as their expertise, as well as access to our teams at Google and Facebook and so forth. But really looking at that time as the main hard expense and identifying, okay, on average, how much time does it take to work on different types of businesses? And of course, we've got so many clients, we've been in business for so long that we have a good sense for, okay, on average, clients may take X amount of work. Obviously, some clients take way more, some less. It's the 80-20 rule, but you average that out. And then you also look at, or what we look at is the economy of scale. So if we have a partner who wants to give us 3 accounts, well, we're probably going to need to charge significantly higher per account than if a client's giving us 50 accounts, because the more work they're giving us, the more kind of assured income is coming in. The more I'm able to say, okay, well, I'm dedicating X amount of time from these team members over here to this partner. I can justify, salaries. I can justify the expense of their time based upon this somewhat assured income. Obviously, no income is assured. Things change all the time. But having a sense for how much of that work is going to be coming in and justifying the expenses of me paying those employees is the primary metric that we're looking at.
And what's just changing tact a bit, but you've kind of alluded to this in the point you made earlier. What's your view about the white label partner having any direct access to the client and having direct communications? Because sometimes, obviously, the agency wants to have that extra resource and have that expertise available to the client, but that obviously opens a whole can of worms and risks as well. But I don't know what your view is on that.
Yeah, so we're always very open to that if that's something the partner wants. The way we approach it is we want to be the solution that you need. So if that's completely white label, client doesn't know that we're executing the work, cool, we'll make that happen. Or some of our partners, they'll actually want to leverage the fact that we are a premier Google partner because that's a big selling point and credibility aspect to communicate to a client. And if they're not in the PPC world, they may not know how to answer a complicated question or help set a strategy. And so they want us
Exactly. Yeah.
to contribute to that conversation. So we're totally open to that. You just, if that's the scenario that you find yourself in as an agency, again, you got to factor that into what you're charging the client, because that relationship is going to directly translate into more time on your end, more conversations with the client, more repetitive work where you're saying something from the client and you're saying something from the agency partner, more access to your team where they have to be available to get on a call with the client within a reasonable time frame, et cetera. So it's totally doable. And sometimes it can be, I think, a positive to all sides, because when you as a white label partner have that direct access, you can avoid pitfalls that your partner might not know how to avoid because they're not the expert in PPC, as an example. So we can hear a question from a client and say, actually, here's the question we should be asking. And point them in the best direction for them. As long as you're getting paid for that and the time and effort that goes into that, then it can work well.
So in that scenario, would you be working under the brand of the client rather than your own brand?
Really, it's all up to the client and what they want. So we have processes in place so that if they want a strict white label, we can operate in the accounts, we can have access to the accounts, we can send reporting that doesn't have any kind of StubGroup logos or information on it. The client can our client, the agency partner, can do with it what they want. Or if we're a known entity and our partner is simply operating as that point of contact because the end client doesn't want to have 10 different vendors they talk to every week. They just want to talk to one person, have that person go do the rest of the work. Then we can do that as well.
And if I'm an agency, again, this comes through sort of experience of my clients, but if I'm an agency and I'm looking for a white label partner, what advice would you give me about separating the good ones from the bad ones? Because I've had a few clients that have actually outsourced PPC to offshore white label agencies, and they have promised a lot at the beginning and then failed to deliver. So what would you say that the things are to look out for?
Offshore is kind of the key word there that you mentioned. So most, certainly not all, but most white label partners, especially if they focus on that, they are paying very cheap labor. Let's say team members in India, the Philippines, somewhere there. And the work product that you're getting out of them is, some respects you're getting what you pay for. If you're going to pay somebody $5 a month to do something, well, that's the kind of work you're going to expect to get. But when you are researching that white label partner, understand, okay, where is their team based? Who's going to be working on the accounts? It doesn't mean that there aren't good resources outside of the U.S. Of course, we have some team members, let's say in the UK or Spain or different places where, hey, they're awesome, and we found them because we live in this remote world where you can find great talent anywhere and it can work fantastically. But if you are researching that partner and realizing, okay, all their team members are not based in the U.S. and it looks like they're primarily just leveraging new, well, I wouldn't say talent, but freelancers you might find on Fiverr, Upwork, who charge $15 an hour or something like that overseas. That's probably not going to be a good fit for you. So that's one thing. Another thing too is really ask them about their processes. What processes do they have in place for white labeling? Because if they have been doing white labeling for a while, they're going to have figured out how to streamline things. They're going to be able to say, hey, yes, when we onboard a client, here's what we do, A, B, and C, and here's how we cut down on communication so that both parties spend less time and get to the core information we need. And here's what happens when a client asks a question of you, the partner, and that needs to get to us. So they should have those answers down pat. if they're sounding, very like they're making it up on the spot of, oh, well, we can do this or that or whatever, then they might just be getting into white labeling and trying to sell a new service, but figuring it out on the fly. So ask
Yeah.
those types of questions.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think really understand the process, because obviously working with a white label partner is going to be different to working with an in-house team. So the systems and processes that are put in place to communicate effectively, to keep up to date with what's going on, to be able to see progress of projects is super important. So that's good advice. Let's just switch it around a bit and say, let's take it from the agency's perspective now. So if I'm an agency, um, when should I consider bringing in a white label partner? I know you've alluded to this already a bit, but let's just turn it on its head and say, I'm an agency, I'm growing,
Mm.
I'm trying to make that decision. Do I bring in a white label partner, or do I hire a team, or do I do it myself? What's your thoughts? If someone was at that crossroads, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I'd say typically, you want to have a market for the service that you're looking into. So let's go back to the SEO agency as an example. If they already have a client roster and they're seeing repeated questions, they're seeing clients, ask them, hey, can you guys do our PPC? Or, hey, can you guys recommend a good PPC vendor? And that's happening consistently. That's telling me as an SEO agency that, hey, I can probably sell this service to our clients because they have this need and they trust that we can help them with this need. And so it's it's going to be an easy sale or a natural sale, as opposed to, you're a PR firm and all of your clients, they've never asked you about doing SEO for them, but you decide, oh, hey, I just want to make more money. Let me go add SEO to my roster. You can do that, and maybe you can do a great job at it, but it's going to be a harder sell because you're trying to create interest in your clients for something new, and they haven't yet expressed that interest to you. So I'd
Mm-hmm.
say that's part of it. And then, deciding, okay, in-house versus outsourced. Really, it comes down to your goals as an agency. Do you want to be a full service agency where you have team members who can do web design, who can do SEO, who can do VPC, who can do PR, whatever the case is, and you do all that in-house? And are you willing to deal with the HR headaches that comes with that, and investing the time and resources into finding the candidates in those disparate fields and vetting them, and figuring out how to gauge their expertise in areas where you might not have much expertise, versus do you want to give up maybe some margin by going outsourced, but also moving that risk away from your in-house team, where you are responsible for payroll every month, regardless of whether your clients are hiring you or paying you, whether how many clients you bring on board, etc.
Mm.
So really, it's risk is a big part of it, and then what your goals are as an agency, and which direction you want to grow into.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think, the niche specialist agency is almost always going to win out against the generalist, especially the smaller to mid-sized agencies. And so sometimes it can be very tempting to feel like the other man's grass is greener because it's hard where I am. So I'll go in and try. I know I'll sell all these other services to my clients, and that very rarely is the solution. So I think hanging on to what you're good at and your specialism is where you want to really be building. And like you say, have a clear plan, have a clear vision, so that that the decisions I'm making are taking me on steps towards delivering that vision, as opposed to just seeing a shiny new object and getting distracted by it. So let's just talk a little bit about when things go wrong. So sorry to be negative, but I think, again, I've sort of had client experiences where things haven't worked out as they hoped. So I feel like good due diligence, we should touch upon that topic. What's the typical causes of why relationships might go a bit sour in the sort of white label agency relationship?
I don't know. I've never had that happen. No, I'm kidding. Yes, relationships will go sour. There will always be fires and things you have to deal with. Common things would be, well, the reality is, if you have a lot of clients with an agency partner, again, that 80-20 rule, there's going to be problems with some of those clients. And that can flavor the entire relationship, because if client A over here, if that particular account went sour, maybe a mistake was made by a team member or whatever the case may be, then that can flavor the other 9 accounts that are doing well, because it's the same point of context, the same relationships. So the ideal relationship that we're always striving for and looking for in partners reaching out to us is just where there's going to be, transparency and communication. If one or the other side messes up, and say, hey, we messed up, apologize, here's what we're doing to make sure we don't make this mistake again, and own up to it and move on, and not get into this tit for tat where, oh, hey, we made this mistake over here, then you made this mistake, and that equals out. But we're bitter about this. That just is a terrible scenario for both parties. So being transparent in communication, being recognizing that, hey, our partner who's hired us, they're counting on us, and we've gotta do well by them. And sometimes that means, I've been on the phone Thanksgiving Day, I've been on the phone, different times saying, okay, hey, there's a problem, here's a fire, we're going to figure it out, we're going to get it solved for you. And showing that level of commitment and care to your partner goes a long way, and then having confidence that, you're the right partner for them. So I think that's important. And then also not letting your partner step on you. That's important as well, because your partner, everybody likes to pass blame. That's just natural and human. And your partner is going to always be incentivized to say, well, hey, things aren't working well for this account because your team did X or Y. And you've got to really dig in and say, you know what? Hey, maybe we made a mistake here, maybe not. But also, here's what's actually going on. And we don't have the information that we need maybe from you to do well for this client. Or, hey, the client, they stopped answering their phones, which we know because we're doing call tracking, and that's why they're not selling. So this is not our fault. You need to have a conversation with your client about how they're handling the sales process. So it's having that level of true partnership, of viewing yourselves as in business together and working together. And sometimes if you have a toxic partner, you've got to cut them. We've had scenarios where we came to believe that a partner is not being straight with us, not doing right by us, and kind of trying to manipulate us to accomplish their ends, and kind of blame us for things that weren't really our problem, try to get stuff out of us. We had to go to them and say, hey, you know what? This isn't working out. We need to have transparency and trust with our partners, and, best wishes to you, but we're no longer the right partner for you. And you've got to be willing to take that step and take the short-term pain that comes from that, in order to not have your life be a living hell.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the key message there is the partner relationship, as opposed to the kind of customer supplier, where the customer's beating up the supplier. And, if you're a white label partner, then you're sort of 2 steps further down, removed from the customer. So there's a danger that can happen even more. Let me just ask you, I want to ask you a couple of other questions before we wrap up, or 3 more questions. But is there a scenario, and obviously let me ask the question. Is there a scenario where the agency would say, look, we've been working with this white label partner for a long time, we've got this consistent amount of revenue coming in for this service, we need to bring it in-house now? And if that happens, how do you sort of manage that?
Yeah, great question. We have not had to deal with that scenario ourselves, thankfully. I'm sure that scenario does happen. I know it does happen. And the first thing, if that happened, if one of our partners came to us and said that, the question is, so just kind of help them thinking through the numbers, because often there's an allure of, yes, I can make so much more money by bringing this in-house, but they don't really get how much work goes into things, what the benefits are even of leveraging, say, a partnership with Google, like we have a Premier Google partnership, the access that gives us, the things that we're doing behind the scenes for their clients. So it's making sure they really understand how much work, how much value we are providing, and they're taking that into account. And then also, helping them understand how hard it is to find good talent in this workforce, and just how much work they're going to have to put into finding those people in-house and keeping them happy, and keeping them retained. Because that's not easy. That's what I spend a lot of my time on, is solving that problem.
I don't know. And I don't know how it is in the US, but I'll tell you, it is a constant conversation over here at the moment. I had my group coaching call this morning, and, recruitment came up again, and someone was saying, I just thought I got the right team, and I've had 2 people resign. And so I think it always seems to be an employee's marketplace, but it seems to be even more the case at the moment, kind of as we come out of the pandemic, when we're recording this. So I guess that's probably true in the States as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd say too, don't burn those bridges. So if a partner makes that decision and brings things in house, again, the reality is they may not like that decision 2 months from now, once they're dealing with the realities of actually handling that team and executing the work. So you want to maintain those bridges and say, okay, hey, you want to take some of the work on? Hey, maybe start with 10 accounts, take them on, see how you like it. We'll keep working with these, and we'll be your scaling arm. So when you need help and you don't have those internal resources, we're still here for you. We'll help you scale. And you can even maybe make a great hybrid relationship where they bring some business in-house, but they keep some business with you, or they use you to leverage in those crunch times when they bring on a bunch of clients and they can't handle them internally. So there's still a lot of ways you can provide and make value, I think, from those relationships, even if they start to bring that in-house.
Yeah, and that's good advice. My second to last question. In my introduction, I said that you've taught digital marketing to 85,000 plus people. That's a lot of people. How do you do that? Is this through online stuff, or how have you reached that number?
Yeah, exactly. Through some online training. So I put together a course really focused on Google Ads, and it's really oriented towards small businesses who are getting into Google Ads and trying to figure out what to do, and trying to help them avoid some of those pitfalls that new businesses, they read Google stuff, they think, oh, this is going to be amazing. Let's do what Google says and put a budget in here. And they wake up the next day and realize I spent a lot of money and didn't get anything for it. So it's trying to help them avoid some of those pitfalls and
I've been there.
get started well.
Yeah, I mean, I can only concur that if you think you can do some of these things yourself that not in your kind of wheelhouse, then you are on a quick road to spending a lot of time and throwing a lot of money down the drain. I've certainly been there myself, with Google, but mostly with Facebook ads. So, John, I'm conscious of our time and keeping the podcast to about 30 minutes. So I just wanted to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests, which is, if you could go back in time and give your younger self, just starting out in business, a piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a great question. I would say be a little more confident. And what I mean by that is, when you're just starting out in business, as I'm sure you know, it's so easy to have kind of that imposter syndrome. I have no idea what I'm doing. All of my competitors, they have it all figured out and they're doing a fantastic job. And how do I get into this space? And just realizing everybody's figuring it out every day. The market's always changing. People look like they've got it together, but we're all figuring it out. And if you invest that time, that energy, that intelligence into what you're doing, and if you're truly meeting a market need and caring for the businesses you're working with, the clients you're serving, then go forth and do it, and things are going to work out.
Yeah, good advice. I think you're right that we have that imposter syndrome and we have to live with it our whole lives, right? Every day we've got this voice going, you're not worthy, you're going to be found out. But it's good good advice. Whether your younger self would listen to that or not, I don't know. But whether my younger self would listen to that, I don't know. But a really good bit of advice. We're coming up to episode 100 of the podcast, and my plan, and I'm saying this publicly now, so I'm going to have to do it. My plan is to take all of the bits of advice that my guests have given me over 50 episodes and put them into one episode to celebrate our 100th. So that's a bit of a project. Idea. And really interestingly, one of the reasons I want to do that is because I don't think two people have ever said the same thing about the advice they give themselves. So I don't think anyone said what you just said, which is really great. So I think there must be a lot of wisdom in that. But John, really appreciate your time. I've really enjoyed the chat. If people want to reach out to you and contact you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn, search my name on there. I'm always looking for DMs on there. If you want to reach out to our company and learn more about our white labeling or services, StubGroup.com, reach out through there, read our case studies, video reviews, all that good stuff. And I'd love to chat.
Great. So I will include your LinkedIn profile and also your the StubGroup's website as well in the show notes. But again, thanks so much for joining us today. I know listeners are going to find this topic useful because they'll be somewhere on their journey of being white label or working with a white label partner. So there's some good nuggets of advice in there. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob.
So I hope you found today's episode useful. As ever, I try to make the episodes as action-packed and actionable for you guys as possible. So I hope you took something away from that will help you manage or find white label partners. If you enjoyed the episode, please make sure that you leave a review, because that really helps the algorithm show me to more people and help more people just like you. And of course, please share the episode with your colleagues as well. Other than that, I will see you next Thursday for the next episode of the Agency Accelerator Podcast.